So I'm going to talk you through what is Bristol is Open. Bristol is Open is a new and exciting thing happening in Bristol. I'm going to talk to you about why are we doing this and what's an open programmable city. I'm going to rush through 5 big trends we see in the next decade. I'm going to rush it because I imagine most of you know it because they're kind of mega trends and I would think you probably know them. We're going to talk about what we're doing in a city, what is city experimentation as a service, and what's co-creation, and how would that work in the health sector. I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology behind it, because it's actually also world-leading, so it's just interesting to understand how that works. And I'm also just going to touch a little bit on Internet of Things and health, because the government's just put up a £10 million IoT health competition. And we would be in a good position in Bristol to take a lead on that. So why are we doing this? What is it that what's the point? Well, there are many points, so I'm going to touch on a few. But we have a very rich seam in our universities locally of microelectronics, and that's been the case for a long time. So we have one of the biggest cluster of microelectronics people in the world, and said to be the second biggest outside of Silicon Valley, actually, for chip design. So there's a lot of strength at the university and a lot of know-how in things like wireless technologies and also in optical connectivity and sort of great interest and excitement there. And there are companies that come on the back of that. We're also home to about a third of the world's natural history program TV making. And that's interesting in this context because we're pushing chip technology and cameras all the time as we try to shoot things and record things in high definition and then edit them between suites, and passing data between edit suites is of interest. We're also running through the Sphere project. I'm sure many of you know the Sphere project, but if you don't, that's a house that's full of sensors. Literally everything is sensed: the floor, the bed, the toilet, the taps, the gas, the fridge. Everything is censored, and the project is exploring what is appropriate, what is socially acceptable, and what is useful in terms of assisted living in houses as you have an increasingly aging population who want to remain living independently as long as possible, but what is the appropriate level of sensing in the house to help with assisted living. We're also talking about creating bubbles of connectivity around ambulances so that you can do 4K visualization of a road traffic accident back to the hospital, or use more data connectivity in a bubble of an ambulance. So we're playing around with that. We're also doing this for renewable energy companies. We're looking at, obviously you probably know about the driverless cars and algorithmic traffic light management. You might know of the Happy City Index people who are really looking at well-being indices as opposed to GDP. So if we only measure GDP, we just continue to consume more, but there are other indices we need to honour more than just GDP. And the City of Bristol is also looking at creating a new operating centre that would use big data analytics and a whole sort of raft of new technologies to combine. First of all, it will be the responsibilities of the council, but there's a dialogue going on with other emergency services about combining as well. So these are all sort of use cases of Bristol is Open. So now I'm going to touch on 5 big trends that we see going on, and I'm really going to rush through them because they just present the context of everything that we're doing. So we see that spending on technology, data, will continue in the coming few years. And the Internet of Things will actually consume more bandwidth than human use of the internet by about 2020. So there will just be a growing amount of machine-to-machine connected communication. If you look at the world, and so there's a connectivity issue in that, this is a graph showing you the average connectivity for a normal citizen, your average citizen, in each of those countries. So UK ranks as 28th in the world. Singapore at the top. I think it's a bit of a cheat because Singapore's very small, isn't it? But so we have on average 29.4 megabits per person. That's the average. And then we're ranked 28th in the world. If you live in South Korea, everyone in South Korea can buy 1 gigabit of connectivity at home. if you want to make use of Bristol is Open, as I'm going to increasingly explain that to you, we'll be able to give you 30 gigabits of connectivity. And that's basically the idea there, is that we're going to give you more connectivity than you know what to do with. And in that place, you might do things that we just don't know what they are yet, because you've never had the opportunity to play with more connectivity than you know what to do with. So that's one of the principles behind Bristol is Open. Bristol is Open does not connect to the internet. It is a research and development testbed. The internet connects to it, but it does not connect to the internet. So megatrend number 2, people will move to cities. And we know of probably that China will have 200 new 1 million person cities in 10 years. India will have 100 new 1 million person cities in 10 years. And we also know that the population of the world goes from 7 billion today to about 9 billion. And we know that it peaks there and starts to decline because we know the birth rate's falling. We also know that most of those people will choose to will either be born into or will move into cities. So more than half of the world's population lives in cities today, and that will grow to about 70% by 2050 or so. Most of this will happen in the south and the east, and if there isn't structure and order put into this, most of it will be slums and be very poorly structured. So there is a very sincere and serious dialogue going on between governments of countries about how this population growth and this growth of cities is going to happen. So there is a rich dialogue going on, particularly with China, India, into the UK, around, and other countries. Could you help us plan our cities in better ways? And that's where the whole argument starts to get interesting as a sort of part of our specialism as a country. Now, this isn't just about the rest of the world in the south and east, because if you look at Bristol, we're the 3rd most congested city in the UK. Our population of people over 85 has grown by 50% in 10 years. We're the fastest growing population of under 4s in the country. We all consume more stuff than we can manage as a planet, about 2.3 times the planet's resources, really. And actually, Bristol is European Green Capital in part because of our use of waste management and some clever things in that. About 60,000 deaths a year are claimed to be connected to pollution. We're certainly pushing the limits of our energy system all the way at the moment, and needing to have radical new solutions to energy. And we're going to have to do all of these, face all of these challenges with less government money. So in that context, the use of technology to face up to some of these challenges sounds like a responsible thing to be doing. We should be using tech to think about how can we make this a better situation. And so that's where you perhaps get the origin of the word smart cities. It was IBM that came up with that in about 2007. And in a way, because they wanted a new market to sell into. So since then, that's quite a long time ago, really, in the world of smart cities, which is a very active and dynamic place. And now what you see, say, in a Bristol is Open project is a city thinking, how can we be smart and be run by citizens? And what would that mean and what would that look like? So we are an interesting place to do this because we're green capital. We're part of the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities movement, which includes places like Fukushima in Japan, and Christchurch in New Zealand, and other cities which have experienced dramatic happenings. And so it's a very rich dialogue between those places. The Sunday Times would say we're the best place to live, and I'm sure they're right. And we're also home to the Playable Cities movement, which, if you don't know about, is just really worth having a Google of, and particularly looking at the shadowing project, which is where we put re-rigged 8 lampposts, put in technology to capture the shadows of people who walked underneath them, replayed for them, and made a sort of playable environment in the city. And Playable Cities is about using city infrastructure, digital technology to have fun and result in a higher quality of life in a city environment. So these are all interesting sort of nuances and flavors into what we're doing as a project. We're not interested in surveillance and big brother spying, which is a lot of where people think all of this tech is going. And so we're very cognizant that we're not doing that. We're doing something different from that. So megatrend number 4, we see the government trying to digitize more and more things. It saves money by doing that. We actually also like it. I just this week did my tax disc, although I don't have a tax disc anymore. Felt a bit nervous about that. It's actually really great, isn't it? So we're all kind of enjoying that, but it's also a good way to reduce the size of the public sector. And here is a very big idea which is underpinning a lot of what we're doing in Bristol is Open. So sorry it's a squiggly diagram and hard to see, but what you see on the right is mobility, then energy, then it says matter cycle, but waste, water, data and information. So a city is a very heterogeneous data environment. I mean, it's everything, isn't it? It's life. But if you use the telco environment to gather data from that place, even though the data is extremely heterogeneous, if you gave yourself a city operating system environment from the telco level, you have one place or a homogeneous environment to manage that very heterogeneous environment. So this is an interesting thought. It initially makes people a little bit frightened because they think, George is going to be behind the scenes pulling levers or something. But it's an interesting principle which we're pushing on with, and I'll explain a little bit more how we're doing it. So we formed a joint venture between the University of Bristol and Bristol City Council. And that is what Bristol is Open is. It's a company limited by shares, and the 2 shareholders are the city and the university. We have the principle of promoting SME growth within the region and beyond. We also have the principle of involving the community all the way through the process. We're looking at digital innovation and things that are far from market, technology readiness level 9, through to things that are close to market, technology readiness level 1. We're an R&D network. We have to just do R&D. So we're not providing you with broadband. We're not connecting you to the internet. But we are giving you phenomenal amounts of connectivity. So about 10 years ago, Bristol City Council bought a bunch of ducts, and we have now upgraded those ducts to be 144 core fiber running through those ducts. That's just a lot of fiber. And one of the nodes is here in Engine Shed, which is obviously a business incubator. Another node is at Bristol, where they have the Planetarium, which is now on the network, and it's the first high-def 3D dome connected to a network in the world. Connected also to Watershed and the Pervasive Media Studios. So that's where Playable Cities typically comes out of. And the brains of all of this is happening up at the university in the High Performance Networks Lab, where we have something called a City Operating System Software Defined Network. So I'm not going to go into lots of detail of that, but I'll touch on it for a moment in a bit. We're also connected to high performance computing environment there and to a cloud environment too. We've also created something called a network emulator, and that allows you to simulate whatever you want on the network and make it look like something real. So with Guangzhou, we've said to Guangzhou, and they're very interested in doing this with us, let's make this network look like Guangzhou for the day. And then you can come here, play around with things that are happening in Guangzhou here, and use us as your test bed for Guangzhou. They like that. We had BBC R&D here saying whenever we put on Glastonbury, we have a big problem because we have 100,000 people trying to tweet and film and floods the network. And we're also trying to broadcast this stuff around the world, and the network crashes, and it's a nightmare from a networking point of view. So we're possibly, the discussion was, could we create Glastonbury on this network for the day and play around with new ways of building connectivity for a media event like Glastonbury. So that's the fiber. We also create a wireless mile of connectivity running along what's called the Brunel Mile. That's 5G experiments. 5G really means anything that's beyond 4G. So it's not really agreed what 5G is, it's just new stuff. And here in Enginstead, there's a firm called Blue Wireless. Blue Wireless are making hardware that will allow you to get over a gigabit of connectivity through their device wirelessly. So the debate about fiber to the home, copper to the home, slightly becomes irrelevant, because you can actually connect straight into the home, but over a gigabit per second wirelessly. So all of those debates that you hear about, broadband infrastructure for the whole country, we will do stuff here that changes that debate. And then interestingly, we've created a mesh canopy, radio frequency mesh canopy across the city using 1,500 lampposts. And this extends over most of Bristol. And that creates an ability to do sensing across the city. So there are a whole variety of reasons that you might want to do that. This is where health definitely might become one of those. You might do temperature. We're discussing whether we might be able to Shazam the birds and then allow us to actually work out how many birds there are, where they are, what type of birds they are, and actually do quantitative science on birds, which will allow us to do intervention in bird population for the first time at a science level and say we did this and the number of birds did that in a quantitative way. So the RSPB's kind of going, oh, wow, didn't know you could do that. And we're not sure if you really can either, but because no one's done it yet, but we're thinking about it. And then there are a whole bunch of things that we might be able to do here. Now, what we've just shown in the dome at Bristol is you can pick up that and visualize it in real time in the dome. So this is very interesting about congestion or air quality, and you can actually sort of get a cockpit of, we did this, and in real time we can see what's happening across the city. So if you take the map out, you get a network diagram that's a bit like that. That's the one that's in your piece of paper if you want one, and sort of tells a story. Now that goes live now. Parts of it are already live. The fiber node is over there in Engine Shed, and the fiber's there. Most of the mesh canopy is there. It's still coming actually because there's cherry pickers going up every day, and bits of the wireless are there, but there's more to come. So that's sort of about ready now. And that's about 2 square miles for the fibre. And then we've got money via the LEP to extend that out across the west of England. So that is a 40-mile by 15-mile now scale. We call that really comparable with any metropolitan region anywhere in the world. And now you've got a network of that scale. And that happens over the next couple of years. I mentioned the software-defined network. Anyone can frankly roll out a network, but what's happening here is innovation in how the network's managed. And I'll do this as quickly as possible, but it's a very important point. So in ICT, hardware and software are always combined. Your Cisco box and your Juniper box, the software and the hardware are combined. In computing, we decoupled it, and we created Microsoft and operating systems, iOS. And then what happened was an enormous amount more innovation took place because the barrier to entry in software was low, whereas the barrier to entry in hardware was higher. So in ICT, what you have is still the software and the hardware combined. It means the barriers to entry in that industry are reasonably high. So Cisco and Juniper networks dominate. If you separate the hardware and the software, create a software layer in ICT, you allow an awful lot more innovation to take place because it's cheaper. Also, the cost of the box goes down as well because you make them in China, and the cost of the box goes down. So this is a revolution that's happening in the ICT market, which is not particularly loved by the big incumbents. But it is loved, for example, by EMC, if you know them, who own VMware, who virtualized the server environment and created the cloud. The same kind of thing is happening in networks. So this allows the networking, which we've always just thought was too complicated to understand and we'll just plug it in, to actually bleed now into computing. And the two industries begin to merge in a way that they haven't really done so far. So what we do with that is really what Bristol is Open is facilitating, and what you as health professionals and people working in tech in health might be able to help us know. So what you do on this, you put an IoT platform on top of it, so now you can make sense of things. Things could be Fitbits, Things could be connected bikes, and you can collect the energy that's being put into the bikes across the city, so you can know the amount of energy being spent on your bikes, your connected bikes, and working out the health impact of that. And one of the reasons we've been able to do this here in Bristol is because of a favourable political environment with George's mayor, who calls the city a laboratory for change. And so he's been very eager to push this, and that has been very helpful. So we already have now a number of very large businesses who are getting excited about joining in. NEC, the Japanese equipment manufacturer, has committed to us for 5 years to run this. There are a few others who are about to do that as well. And they will be helping create experiments. Experiments could be assisted living, they could be driverless cars, they could be something to do with health, they could be creative content. And the idea there would be to have a business partner, an academic, a service delivery organization, maybe GP practice, maybe hospital, who would work with a company to do something that you want to do. And that's perhaps where the government's 10 million IoT health competition might be interesting for us all to get involved with. There's a little picture inside the dome. I'm sure that's Bono. But if you put the whole story together, here you get experiments with a software environment, which is very innovative in a city that's plugged in, using open data. So there's a whole element of actually the council saying that our data is open unless it's closed, unless it's confidential, rather. So there's already 200 odd data sets, and that's a rich source of information for everyone. So about £75 million has gone into this. It's actually about £5.5 million of new cash, but we've cobbled together lots of things that are existing around the city, making about 75 million. And as I said, the joint venture company exists. Paying customers will form a part of an advisory panel, and they will help us evolve the network, work out what experiments we really want to do, how the engineering required to support this works, and how we publicize it. At the top of the diagram, the idea is that long-term customers will get a fixed fee. At the bottom of the diagram, you've got people who get pay-as-you-go. So you will be able to set up a pay-as-you-go hourly account on this from about September onwards this year, and dip in and out as you need it. And essentially, that's the story. So thanks for listening. If you want more information, there's a leaflet. We're a really small team, like it's me. So please don't all email me and say how interesting it is, because it is, isn't it? But in September, we'll really know what to do. So I'd really appreciate it if by September, we'll have a team in place, we'll have an account management process, and we'll actually be able to manage the volume of interest that we think there will be. At the moment, we're still slightly in setup mode. That's it.
I'm really interested in what you said about the internet. You said this does not connect to the internet, but the internet connects to it. Without getting too techy, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So because we're offering a massive amount of connectivity, if this connected to the internet, you would all want it, and you would all stop using your internet service providers, and we would be shut down through a state aid challenge instantly. So we can't connect to the internet. Technically, the fact is, anyone who knows how you connect networks to each other could probably connect our network to the internet fairly quickly. But we've got sort of safeguards on it that mean that we'll know if that's happened and we'll shut it down. And it's nothing more than a state aid issue, that we have received state aid to make this thing. The government has paid for it. And so we cannot be putting commercial ISPs out of business because of it. So it has to be used for R&D only. That's the answer.
Gave us a really nice talk about connecting health data and all the difficulties of getting 17 different groups together to agree how to connect that data. It doesn't sound as though the technical capabilities were the issue. It was getting those organizations to agree protocols for exchange of the data. So of we're going to use this in health, what are the things we need to put in place to allow service providers to talk to your thing? Do you have any thoughts about
Who would you mean as a service provider in that?
what would happen if you turned up University Hospitals Bristol and said, I want to connect into your health data system?
I think they wouldn't like it because they're not allowed to, are they? So they're not allowed to do that for patient privacy things, aren't they?
Well, you can imagine what a benefit would be for
Yeah.
health if you knew what all the patients were doing in the hospital at the time. So how do we make that happen? It's a little question for you as we come from the audience.
Phew.
So we should look to other places where we've done it.
It's on another topic. Don't know if we finished that discussion. My question is around what sort of data is available about the state of the local natural resources and the environment within our.
That's a great question. So I'm not an expert in this, but I am very friendly with the guy who runs Avon Wildlife Trust and like talking to him about it. And it was actually his idea to Shazam the birds. There is a manually created number of a sort of nature record that is done somewhere between the Environment Agency and Avon Wildlife Trust and others. So there is a sort of data thing, but it's a manual record. It's not particularly accurate or particularly well maintained. And of course, it's very interesting for us to think, how can we use this to get much more knowledgeable about the natural environment around us, and then start to have better policy interventions for that. So I think there's quite a lot of excitement about that. In a sense, I'm not here to give you an answer. What I'm here to do is saying we've got a platform on which these things can then be done. So those funny wiggly boxes, which I end up realised looking a bit like the election logo I noticed the other night, that's an experiment. We're giving you the environment for you to do that experiment, and these environments don't really exist. You can't. There aren't any other cities in Europe where you can do this. So we're creating a platform, and I don't really know the answer, but that's the point of us in a way. Hello. Yes. Here is an idea that's brewing, which isn't funded yet, but the idea is brewing and is seeking to be funded, and I think it's excellent. So what we haven't deployed, because we haven't got the money to do it yet, is a lot of sensors. So in a sense, the sensors are missing from this story. So there is an idea of creating something called the Bristol Maker Lab, and using the knowledge transfer from all of these folks who are very clever in chip design to do some skills development for people who are in South Bristol, Noah West Media Centres taking the lead on this. Actually create the sensors, design and fabricate the sensors locally in Bristol. And rather than these things sitting on the top of lampposts and anonymously hidden away as if they're spying on us, actually put them in very visible places that people know are there and can touch. And actually, whose data is this? And what's the point of all this? Is it actually all about spying? Not really. It's about us as citizens both making the sensors, so learning skills transfer through that, deploying and managing the sensors, and then actually discussing together what it is we're trying to sense. So this data is collectively owned by us. Now that's a great vision. We haven't yet got the money to do it. We're competing with others to get the money to do it. But I really like that because it's not just Big Brother spying. It's this, is this city data for the people in the city? Then why isn't the city benefiting from the creation of the sensors, deploying them, deciding what we're sensing, owning the problems, owning the solution? And I find that to have a lot of integrity as an idea. So that is an idea we're trying to do.
I know that there's a lot of interest in terms of energy generation, but also energy monitoring. There's quite a big agenda around energy poverty, or being able to monitor different usages and bring down costs. The energy service company, which is starting up in Bristol, has that been explored at all?
Yeah, sure. So the energy company will use the connectivity from this grid to make smart grid. We're not going to build that smart grid technology. It already exists. Others have made it. But it will use the massive amount of connectivity that we've got here to send data around the grid. And so that hasn't been done before. And particularly using the software-defined network version of this, which gives you a sort of data layer of knowledge. That's all innovation and new stuff.
Would you mind shouting? My apologies. Would you mind sort of shouting very loud?
So I suppose when Facebook, Google started, they weren't about spying, but if the security service and the police come and say, we need to use this resource, we can save lives, and you can't tell anyone, I guess they could say no. Are you planning on putting a safeguard in so that you could say no?
So people in every talk raise the issue of data privacy and data security, and quite rightly so. And I have now got a fairly pat answer as a result of knowing what to say, not knowing what to say. The answer is our laws aren't really not made for this situation that we're getting ourselves into. And so there is no legal framework here that is appropriate. So one of the things that we are going to do in this is study the ethics of it. And my opinion is worthless, quite frankly, so I'm not going to have one. And I'm going to let people who are lawyers and ethics thinkers do the thinking, because it's actually extraordinarily complex. And we're really entering into new territory. So I don't know the answer. And it's time we got people who are really devoted and clever in this space to really think through. And it should be part of this, and it will be part of this.
Can this be very much more sort of citizen-driven? Because as you say, from a legal framework, and as soon as you start getting lawyers and because of the pressure from the corporate world, can we sort of maintain that citizen-centric sort of revolution that we'd like to see at the heart of this?
So I'm just going to go back to this slide and say, so this stuff is happening, and it's happening all over the world. But we're actually at the moment seen to be in a fairly leadership position at the moment in some of this. And I'd say that's good, because I think there are values in this environment that I think many of us hold very dearly, which are obviously on your mind. And is it better for us? This technology is just technology. It's absolutely neutral. So what it does is up to us to decide. And that's why I think the playable cities thing is a really important thing. Rather than deploy more and more CCTV base this on crime, fear, and snooping. Actually think about playable cities. You can deploy this technology for quality of life and happiness. So isn't it interesting that most of it's been done for snooping and surveillance? Why? Only because that's what people with the budgets did with it. So is this city a good place to be playing with that? Well, I think so. I think we've got a sort of great culture in the city to not be this being just more corporate snooping. But that's down to us engaging and doing it. So Bristol and Bath City region has the highest number of people working in digital technology in the UK outside of London. So about 250,000 people in London and about 65,000 people in Bristol and Bath. So we have a population of people who are very capable of engaging with this. And you know, it's up to us, isn't it, to make it do good stuff.